Hey, hello everybody who are watching us at the moment. We are live now and directly from Beamline Accelerator. And hopefully we are going to have a nice and fruitful discussion panel on challenges in agriculture, but most of all, of course, solutions. And we rather discuss on possibilities, solutions together with our panelists. We have quite many of them today, but also with you, the audience. So you are very, very welcome to ask questions during the panel, during the discussion. So you can just write to the chat in different channels. So be active, please. Yeah, but just to start with, it is probably a well-known fact that a huge part of our agriculture today relies on different chemicals, pesticides, and other artificial chemicals for higher yields, as well as our soil health and biodiversity loss are getting more and more problematic. And we all have to face the consequences and do something about it, I think. However, probably less people know that there are solutions already today and probably more to come. And we are really here to help to discuss on these solutions and to improve the situation. So today we are here to show some solutions and ask questions if there still is and where is the place to innovate. We have, as I said, we have a number of panelists here from different parts of the world. And I really think that all the panelists agree that the research and data are the ones or the key components that needs to be included to the agricultural innovation. And this is also where all the panelists have their expertise from one side or the other. But we will hear about it. So I'm going to present the panelists quite soon, but just to start with myself, I just say a few sentences about myself. I am Karme Petrutis. I come from Estonia, and I am the moderator for today. I have also experience from different sides of agriculture, especially from my professional work at Estonian Agricultural Research Center. But I'm also a co-founder of a tiny, small startup or company, and also micro farmer as well. And today I'm also a trainee at Beamline Accelerator, but mainly working on program development. And together with me, we have Erkki from Beamline here, who is really, I hope, helping me out if I need some support, but also to join us in discussions and really giving some examples and so on. But he's going to talk about himself a little bit as well. We also have actually Trino from Beamline here, who is somewhere behind the stage, helping with technical issues. And just, she was there. So, but I just say one sentence about Beamline first, just to remind you that Beamline is a business accelerator for clean tech companies. And right now, very important, we have open call for startups working on innovating agriculture. So check us out and look more on our website, beamline.fund. Yes, but now I really have to introduce you our panelists. We have here really international Oliver, who is currently, yes, Oliver, hello. He is currently working with company Metabolic, as well as setting up a new business focusing on putting farmers in the driver's seat of their transition to regenerative agriculture. So he's really passionate about natural environment and its complex interactions. Also rural economic development and regenerative agriculture, as I said. So we have also here Kadri Ailik from Agriculture Research Center from Estonia. And she describes herself as a nature person who is really fascinated about the important role of agriculture. And she's working at the Estonian, as I said, Agriculture Research Center, which is the public organization supporting agriculture and rural development in Estonia. And Kadri knows a lot about soils, what is going on there, and she's going to talk about this, I hope. And she's also a researcher at the Estonian University of Life Sciences. And we have also Michael here, Michael. Oh, the name is difficult, sorry. But he gives a startup perspective to our discussion. And he is CEO and co-founder of Biodiversity, which is the preserving of nature for future generations is what drives him. And he is also a specialist in business coaching, collective intelligent techniques, facilitation, and so much more. Okay, but in 2012, he co-founded Biodiversity, where he is responsible for business development and daily management. And I really hope that we are going to hear about your great experience and the way to the successful company. So we are going to talk about it. But I really would like to talk or start with Oliver first. And I have a direct question to you.
Yes.
You have given so many talks lately about soil health, about regenerative farming, and I really would like to ask from you, what is going on with our today's agriculture? Where is the problem actually? What we want to innovate here?
Yeah, well, that's a big question, and I'll try to keep it simple. But in terms of the environment, we see that the main problems we have in terms of planetary boundaries are biodiversity loss, problems with geochemical flows, and those are fertilizers, pesticides, so toxins in the environment, but also overloading the environment with too much nutrients, which have a lot of negative effects. And then the third big one is probably climate change. Agriculture in Europe at this point is one of the leading causes of climate change. On the farm fields is approximately 10% of emissions, but the whole food chain is 30% of EU emissions, which is a significant portion, obviously. And in terms of biodiversity loss and geochemical flows, there we have already far exceeded the safe zone, so to speak. We're really entering into danger territory where a lot of species are getting extinct at an accelerating pace. And eutrophication for the people living in Estonia, for example, the Baltic Sea is a great example. A lot of nutrients flowing into waterways. 99% of the Baltic Sea is eutrophied, which means that it's overloaded with nutrients and really disturbing the environment. So in terms of agriculture, I would say this is probably the key elements combined with the decline in soil health. So current industrial agriculture is really destroying the soil health. And this is important not only for now, but definitely into the future. And this kind of ties all these elements together. Chemical flows, biodiversity, and climate change are all linked to soil health in a way. Then I would say if we go to more of an economic perspective, I would say that the main challenge of farmers is that their profit margins are going lower and lower and lower. And the main reason for this is farmers are degrading the soil, not because they want to, but just because of the current model that is being used in agriculture. It's not their choice, but it's the model that has been taught in universities for a long time, but also promoted by a lot of these agrochemical companies, and farmers have been adopting those. And in the beginning, they've really pushed the yield levels higher, but that's come at the cost of soil health. And now you see that because the soil health has been so degrading that year after year, farmers have to buy more fertilizers, more pesticides, but the yields are not increasing. So the profit margins are shrinking. And if we don't do something about it in Europe, we'll end up in a similar situation as Australia and the United States, with large areas of land being left severely degraded, farms going bankrupt. This is already slowly starting to happen in Europe. So we can learn from these countries there. Another part is probably farmers are a bit pushed to the edge economically. They're squeezed between the supply chain, one hand, large chemical companies, and then retailers on the other hand, I would say. So they don't have a say in at what price they sell products. They're price takers. So they get very low prices for the products, I would say. And combined, those are a real squeeze. So low prices and the profit margins are decreasing. That's a real issue. And socially, in general, farmers are a bit stigmatized these days. They're often blamed for a lot of the problems in terms of the environment, sadly enough. You can see this clearly in a lot of news outlets. There's been also farmer protests. There's some kind of lack of understanding. There's not a great relationship at this point, I would say. And within the farming community itself, it's a largely graying population. So it's getting older and older. You see that the majority of farming managers are actually above 60 years old, which is quite old. And not enough young people entering into farming. So we really need for the future young people entering into farming. And then the last thing that's probably broader for society, the nutrient density of food has been declining. So our production methods have been producing food that's been lower and lower in nutrients, and we now have to eat much more food to get the same nutrient amount as we did in the past. So some examples are 2 times more vegetables, 3 times more meat sometimes. It depends on where it comes from. So it's quite severe, the nutrient decline. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think that's a small overview.
Yeah, thank you so much, Oliver. It looks really, really serious. And to be honest, I actually recognize myself in very many things you are saying. So being myself farmer, I understand what you're saying. But my next comment or question is, can we really do something about it? And you are experts. You panelists are all experts in different fields. What can we do about it? Maybe Kadri, can you explain what is your institution? Can your institution help, or how do you see this situation?
Yes, I think that my organization can provide soil data that could help farmers to have a better knowledge about their lands and soil status, and then they can make better decisions about their land management and what they are growing on their lands, what is suitable for those soil conditions, and so on. So I guess that it is very useful information for the producers to have a good data for starters.
Yeah, as I know, your organization is, or our organization, it's really gathering, for example, information about the soil carbon.
Yes.
Could you bring example why a farmer or why for example a startup could use this information? Where can we use this, or how widely are you collecting actually this information?
The data about soil organic carbon is just one parameter that we are collecting. The farmers in Estonia have to take soil samples and analyze them in the laboratory, and then they get results from us. And also we are saving their data to our database if they give us agree to it. So and other parameters are about soil pH value, the main plant nutrients like potassium and phosphorus, for example, and microelements. We measure bulk density from the soils, and actually not all farmers have to take soil samples. Only those who are under the support measure system from the rural development plan. Only those farmers have to collect their soil samples every 5 years. So I could say that it is monitoring their soil. They get new results every 5 years, and they can see trends, how their pH value is changed. pH value describes are the soil alkaline or acidic, so they can can do some like liming if the soils are too acidic, and or maybe it's fine, then they don't have to do something about it. And I would like to address that healthy soils are soils that are in good condition. So then if we are talking about healthy soils quite widely nowadays, then we have to know how to describe a healthy soil. And this is all those parameters that I mentioned before. They are describing the soil condition quite well. And of course, one of the well-known healthy soil ecosystem service that it will provide is to act as a carbon reservoir. And why it is so important in the context of climate change, it is because soils are the largest terrestrial carbon pools in the planet. So if you are looking at the system where are vegetation, soils and atmosphere, then almost 65% of the carbon is sequestered in the soils. So this is why it is so well known in the context of climate change.
Yeah, really interesting. I think all the discussion and all the information about soil, it's really interesting. It's really complex. It depends on so many things and so on. So I think it's a really interesting topic. But I'm just wondering. I know that Michael, your company, or I don't know if I can I say startup?
Yeah,
My
you
company
can.
is startup. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you are doing also really interesting things, and you have many tools, solutions, especially regarding to biodiversity, as I have understood. Yeah, but could you add to Kadri a little bit another perspective, startups perspective, and maybe you could a little bit start with a short story about your company. Why? How? Who? So go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the why, well, we started the company in 2013 after my associate did a PhD on the bee decline issue, and worked for a main university in Belgium on the biodiversity decline, future of agriculture, and so on. And he wanted to do a project to get people to be involved in biodiversity regeneration. And so we understood that to get people involved, you have to show that biodiversity can create value. And so that's really what we do. We try to innovate, we try to find solutions to really create value with ecosystem services in biodiversity. And what we like to do the most is to combine solutions based on nature, technology, and the involvement of local players to have the most impact as possible. And so we've now acting in 10 countries in Europe, in the US, and starting in Africa as well, with that belief.
Wow, really large scale. Okay, but Oliver, you have your company Metabolic, and then another company you are working on. Can you relate this to similar things that Michael is doing, or could you explain?
Yeah, to clarify, Metabolic is not my company, right? It's,
Okay,
it's a company
sorry.
I'm working
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
But yes, Metabolic is a ecosystem of organizations. One of them is a consultancy. I think that's the most important for this part. And the consultancy has an agri-food and biodiversity team. And this company or these consultants are working with large corporates, NGOs, to do studies on the effect of the agri-food system or just in general on biodiversity. So examples are with WWF, we did for the Baltic Sea region, we did analysis of the chemical flows coming from agriculture, nitrogen, phosphorus, gallium, etc. At what scale is this happening? Where are hotspots? How is this affecting the Baltic Sea? What are key points where we can start building solutions to have the highest impact? So in general, metabolic uses systems thinking. So really analyzing the system in a very holistic way to try and understand where is actually the most impact possible, what are key leverage points, and if we address those will have the most impact. Other examples is working together with some corporates. We've worked together with Alpro, PepsiCo, Unilever, etc., to help them implement more biodiversity friendly or regenerative agricultural practices to incentivize people in their supply chain, for example, farmers in their supply chain to transition, but equally just at the company level. How can they as a company become more sustainable and contribute as a supply chain? I think that's really important, or rather a supply web. It's not just a farmer where things have to change, but it's the supply web as a whole that needs to support the solutions in general. And GENS is kind of a response to the need we see at this point. Regenerative agriculture is a new term in a way, but it's the idea of having the outcome of regeneration through agriculture. That's the simplest way I can say it. And to do that, the goal is to farm together with nature instead of fighting against nature. At this point, using the chemicals, the mineral fertilizers, we're really fighting against the mechanisms of how nature works. And this we're losing that battle. We're never going to win that. It's not smart. It doesn't make a lot of sense also business-wise. You can see that now with farmers going bankrupt, profit margins decreasing. But instead, by understanding how these natural principles work, the natural regeneration engines, how do soils work? How do soils and plants communicate? How does the soil microbiology play a role in this all? By using that understanding and using that knowledge to farm, we can really, really reduce the input intensity, and we can move towards net zero farming systems. It's not easy necessarily. I'm not saying that's easy, but it's very possible. And instead of letting nature regenerate itself, where nature might take hundreds of thousands of years, by having this knowledge, we can accelerate that process dramatically. 3 to 5 years, we can really, really see good results in the soil. But the challenge is there's not enough people with in-depth knowledge on this in Europe. There's a handful of real experts, I would say, who are independent. So they're not selling products. They're just there to give farmers advice. And this is a bottleneck. So with GENS, we want to build tools and services that bridge that knowledge and allow more people to interact, or more farmers to interact with regenerative agriculture, and give them the tools so they can take charge of the management of their farm of regenerative systems.
Yeah, really, really useful activities and all this consultation and everything. But I'm just wondering, I just got a question to Michael. Your activities, your tools, are they more for farmers, or are they for society as in general, or how is it? I'm just listening to Oliver. I'm just listening to Oliver, and seems it's more towards farmers, as I understand. Yeah, but Michael, what about you?
Yeah, they're for farmers, of course, but for society globally. So to give you one example, we developed a solution. We noticed that there was no technology actually to monitor large zones in terms of biodiversity and in terms of industrial or agricultural pollution. And so we realized that bees could be a solution. So we work with bees as little natural drones, and they will collect samples in the area on large surfaces, and we analyze these samples to see whatever kind of pesticide you have, what kind of nitrates, what kind of agricultural pollutants, what kind of industrial pollutants you have, and what is the quality of the biodiversity at specific periods of the year in terms of quantity or in terms of quality. And so with these metrics on large areas, We can then, share the metrics to our clients, so they can come from the food sector, from the water sector, they can be cities, they can be regions, they can be industries and so on, but also to their local stakeholders. So very often we share that to local citizens, to local farmers, to other actors, so that they can act. And once they receive the data, and it's great to see, especially with farmers, when they see the data, they always say, this is what we miss. We know we use pesticides, but we don't know at what concentration level they're in the environment, what's their impact on our soil, what's their impact on water, on our own health, and so on. And that's what we provide, to raise awareness. And once they see that, then they're willing to go into a transition. And then, of course, you have to help them to go into that transition. As Olivier said, it's not easy for these farmers to change, but I think they're willing also to change, and it's a matter of providing them with the data, providing them with advice, and that are affordable, of course, and with solutions to change.
Yeah, wow. It's really, really promising. So I think I really see, I clearly see there are solutions already, and I am sure there are still places for innovation as well. I just want to remind for the new listeners who just came in that we are live in a Beamline Accelerator from Beamline Accelerator, and that is the place which invests to clean tech companies, providing them with founder-friendly financing and acceleration program. So, as I said, we are live. We are really waiting for your questions. I'm just in a short looking the chat and asking some questions from there as well. So you are welcome to ask and to comment there. So okay, but I would still like to have some more examples of really successful and good examples. So I would really like to give the word to Erkki now, and just Erkki, as far as I know, he is CEO in Cleantech Forest. Yes, I hope I'm correct, and also co-founder of Beamline, of course. So please take it away. Bring some good examples. What have you seen in your work?
Yeah. For me, it's really fascinating to kind of observe-ish here, because since I worked with cleantech startups like daily for the past 6 years, and I find it really kind of fascinating that each of the webinars that we have kind of the similar structure that we have, the kind of data providers or data collectors, in this sense, the Agricultural Research Center, that we have the kind of a holistic or systematic approach to what needs to be changed in the face of Oliver, and then the biodiversity has a very specific kind of aspect to a specific problem as well. As we have understood, the agriculture issue and the future that we're looking at, it is a very holistic and systematic kind of problem we need to solve, and we need thousands of those solutions, such as Michael is representing here, to actually, create the future of agriculture. In my mind, I think that's super important. However, just to maybe bring in a couple of innovations or startups that we are working together with as well for the past years. So if we're looking at digitization or increase in efficiency and decrease in energy usage, for example, then we have a startup called LavaTech that is providing vertical farms, kind of intelligent lamps or intelligent lighting that reduces the energy consumption of the farm, as well as increases the yield. So these are basically, you can kind of imagine a lamp that understands how hungry you are at the moment, or what kind of light wave or frequency you would need to grow in the most efficient way. But I'd like to maybe bring in a question for Oliver, because looking at this holistic approach, and as I'm representing also the Estonia and the Estonian green tech sector, are you really saying that in Estonia we have like a huge issue with fertilizer? Because Estonia is regarded as a very kind of natural country. 50% of the country is forest. The rest is a very small amount of people living here who shouldn't be consuming too much. But you are saying that we are not in that of a good situation, or what?
No, exactly. Yeah, that's a good observation. So in terms of fertilizer and pesticide use, in the past 10 years, it's been increasing between 150 and 200%, depending on which type of fertilizer or pesticide we're talking about. So it's really on the rise. And where after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we saw there was a drop really in usage of fertilizers and pesticides. During that time, there was a ridiculous amount of usage of mineral fertilizers, which has left a heritage, I would say, in terms of soils. Then it's dropped, and then the industrial agriculture model has been really, really rapidly spreading in Estonia. So in general, no, it's definitely a challenge in Estonia. Yes, there is a large amount of Estonian farmers who are farming organically, and there a lot of products are not used. But a large part of those are actually grasslands, I would say. It's not only crops, right? It's pastures that are and those are good. I'm not saying anything negative about it, but in general, it's not, pastures are not always the most input intensive systems, definitely not in terms of pesticides, I would say. Then forest wise, Estonia has a lot of forests, but they're not natural forests. They're usually monoculture forests, and that's really bad for biodiversity. They're mainly spruce forests, as far as I understand. And in general, it's like a biodiversity desert. There's very, very little different types of species that can live in these types of forests. So although Estonia has a lot of green space, it's not necessarily in a good health, and it's not necessarily biodiverse. What I do think is that Estonia is in an extremely unique position in Europe to change something about it. It's not as bad as in other countries in terms of fertilizer and input use yet. And there is a turning point I see coming. Like either there's a different road Estonia goes now, and they can really still profit from an underutilization of land. Land is not being used optimally. There's a lot of land being underused at this point, I would say. And that can be used very efficiently through regenerative agriculture, which benefits biodiversity, but also the farmers and society by producing nutrient-dense food. So, yeah.
But they kind of require data for it, right? So
data is one thing. At this point, I think in terms of, in general, in terms of alternative farming practices, it's always, but what does it bring me? What's the profitability of it? And this type of data is emerging in Europe. It's not very clear yet. We know from farms that it is much more profitable. And if we look at the United States, for example, we see that it can be 3 times to 6 times as profitable for farmers, which is really, really, it's not the small increase, it's exponential. It's quite significant. But it's seeing is believing, right? Farmers, even though you might have data, there's still a component like, it's my farm, it's unique, you don't know my farm, or my soils are different, and there's valid reasons there that farmers really believe, and some parts are definitely unique on a farm. But we see that this is being applied in the tropics, it's being applied in northern countries, it works. It's a system of thinking according to the principles of nature. And that nature is everywhere in that sense. So
yeah, but Oliver, just to clarify, the data you are talking about, is it like financial data, or is also the data about I don't know, soil health, biodiversity, and so on? And how available is this data? How are your feelings about that?
It depends, because there's a lot of data, right? In just and Kadri knows more about this than me. Just in terms of soil health parameters, what are we talking about? Are we talking about carbon? Are we talking about the nutrients? Are we talking about the macronutrients, the micronutrients? Are we talking about the biodiversity in the soil? It's an ecosystem, right? And there's so much data there. There is already so much data available, but we can't expect farmers to make sense of that data immediately. Then there is a ridiculous amount of satellite data emerging at very high resolution, where a lot of things can be done with. We can look at crop health through satellite data. It's an approximation, it's not perfect, but it gives us good insight. There's weather data. I think in general, it's not the lack of data that's there, it's how can we make this data useful for a farmer? Because just giving the raw data to a farmer doesn't do anything. They won't be able to interact with that.
Yeah, true. And I actually have the same question to Kadri, because I know that at least at our Estonian Agriculture Research Center, there has also been discussion on what kind of data we have and how valuable it is, and what are actually the limitations of such data. So I would like to ask from Kadri, especially about those limitations. How do you see that as a researcher? What are the limitations of such kind of big data?
Well, I think that the main problem is that the soil data is not public available. It is only farmers can have their own data, and they can have a data about results of the surveys, that what are the trends in Estonia. But actually, the data is quite just stays in the organization where it is collected. And we have had many thoughts about how to use it more effectively our own too. So we have produced some map layers for the farmers, that they can have idea where are the eroded soils, for example, and what kind of crops can be grown in their lands, and so on. But I guess that like Oliver said, that farmers aren't so responsive yet to use this data, that actually there is some already, but they are like hesitant or something. It has to be changed in the future, I guess. That it is a problem, yes, that even farmers don't use their own data very much also to make decisions about how they will, how much fertilizers they use, how much pesticides they use. They like have some kind of plan and they stick to it. It's sometimes very difficult to change.
Yeah, I really feel that something has to be changed in this system. Yeah, but I'm just wondering, Michael, you have big company already. It's growing. It's successful. But what is the importance of such kind of data? What kind of data have you actually used in your work, either when developing your tools or some kind of concrete solutions for certain companies, for the farmers, and so on?
Well, for the food production sector, for example, we will be able to really identify the kind of pesticides, nitrates, etc., on site. So at a very specific site, and we can also, measure the concentration level. So to what extent these pesticides are present, we can see, if you have forbidden pesticides and so on. And when you look at the level of these pesticides still in the environment, then you can start helping those farmers to potentially use the pesticides if they need to use it, but at a proper level, and to change the practices so that they already decrease the use of pesticides, and then get them slowly into a transition towards other practices. And so we work with large groups or small farmers to really, work on different farms and help them and compare what they do with our results and show them the correlation between their methods and practices and the results we get out of it. And in terms of biodiversity, we'll be able to really show what is the quantity of species you have in the area, what is the quality of these species also for nutritional aspects, for pollinators or other species, and see exactly at what period of the year there might be a lack of biodiversity. And so really get them to plant or to change the management of their sites in order to have a kind of resilient biodiversity on a yearly basis, and with the proper biodiversity on a yearly basis, you have more pollination and you have, ecosystem services that will favor local farming. So, and we really change the ecosystem of regions or farming regions with a gain on the profitability of those farmers as well through this data. So it's going more specific in terms of data, really at a site level, and it can be the tools linked to bees or other tools we develop. It's always about providing data on the pollution and on very specific aspects of biodiversity, so that and providing solutions as well, so that they can act at a site level.
Yeah, well, it's really, really practical. I think it's it's really useful if you're using the same data which is actually gathered for the same company, for the same farmer, and relate and find solutions, practical solutions. What could they actually do to improve the situation? But you mentioned bees. We have got a comment from Ahmed, sorry, that he's commenting that indeed the bees, particularly honeybees, are important parts of biodiversity, and we are really facing fast insects populations collapse, different types of pollution, particularly toxic pesticides and chemical pollution. So it's
Yeah, if I can just react on that, domestic bees are important, but all the other, solitary bees or other local pollinators are super important as well,
yes.
and probably as important or sometimes even more important that domestic bees. And the issue is not about pollution. So it's been proven now, and my associate is one of the first one that came with this theory, is that it's due to various factors. And one of the main factor is the lack of biodiversity. So as Olivier said, forest or monoculture and so on has a huge effect on the states of bees or other pollinators. And so it's not only about chemicals, it's also about having a resilient local biodiversity.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for this comment. Okay, but could we maybe take a few more questions from the audience? And I really, dear audience questions, then it's getting weak information, and we can really use the experts and get their knowledge during this panel. But we have a question from Justas, which is very specific to Baltics, as I understand. He asked that could you please determine the size of the Green Deal in Baltic states and in the EU in general? You could compare the CO2 numbers of pollution in and in the EU. And don't you think that are already in green status for over a decade? Maybe Oliver, you could say something about it. Could you? Or
yeah, I don't know the specifics about the Green Deal in the Baltic states. I as far as I know, the policy rounds or the exact agricultural, the new cap was recently signed a month ago or something, and I don't know if everything is published yet, as far as I know. What I do know in terms of CO2, that the Baltics are definitely not in the green. Estonia, but this is not necessarily related to agriculture. Estonia is one of the most CO2 intensive countries in Europe per capita. This is mainly due to the oil shale. This is not agriculture, but oil shale is, I don't remember, it's 80% or something of Estonian emissions is oil shale, or even more. So no, they're definitely not in a green status for over a decade in terms of carbon. In terms of agriculture, I would say that main sources of emissions in agriculture is Estonia is a grain and a milk country. Those are the two biggest commodities they produce in terms of agriculture. But milk is not being produced naturally on pasture outside. They're feeding high protein or high energy feed to livestock, which has an effect on methane emissions also. They're kept inside, so the pastures are not necessarily in a natural symbiosis. And I think one of the key elements there is that if livestock is out on pasture naturally, and there's a symbiotic relationship between grass and cows. They evolve together. Grass needs to be eaten to be healthy. That's the way it is. This is the regeneration of grass. Otherwise, it starts stagnating and it is not as productive and healthy in a way. If it's not as productive and healthy and we only cut the grass very shortly, then it's also degrading the grass. It's short grass. It never gets to a full maturity. It never is optimizing photosynthesis. But in a healthy ecosystem, there is photosynthesis happening, then there's evaporation happening, and there's photooxidization of this water vapor, and that creates hydroxylines. Hydroxylines are free radicals which just absorb all the methane. So in relation to that, if you would look at per hectare in a healthy pasture with livestock on pasture, then we see that there are more than 100 times the free radicals being produced to clean the air than there is methane being produced. But this is not how it's happening in Estonia. It's happening inside of the barn, being fed there, and then you don't have this natural symbiosis. Equally with grain. Grain is a monoculture over vast areas in Estonia. Not a lot of biodiversity, quite often still a lot of tillage is happening in Estonia, so no cover of the soils. So there's also a large emissions there. Fertilizers, Estonia has 55% nitrogen use efficiency, it's quite low. So 55% is just gone. Volatilizes into the air, goes into the waterways, is locked up and not used. More than half. So no, Estonia is not in the green, definitely not. Sorry to say, but
Yeah.
these are this is the data.
That's the data. Yes. Michael, I'm just wondering, in relation to biodiversity and CO2, or the soil carbon, or the carbon in general, do you have some kind of tools or solutions, or in relation to carbon, or not at all? Is it somehow related? Could you explain?
Well, there's a relation between biodiversity and carbon, of course, and so you can capture CO2 and so on. We're not really working on the carbon topic, although there's a link. So we have partners who work on those topics to calculate, the say the storage of carbon in soil or in local biodiversity. But we don't work on the topic. But there's a stronger relation, of course, between the two. And that's why you see also projects today to kind of compensate, even though I don't like the word, CO2 emissions with planting projects, which before were monoculture planting projects for part of those projects. I think now the actors working in that field understand as well that they have to start, taking into account the diversity of the species. And I hope it will go that way in the future, because it's good to store carbon and compensate carbon, but then you have to do it in a proper way and respect local biodiversity and even regenerate biodiversity. So I strongly believe you have to work on both aspects and not just on carbon.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think, very, very important thing here, and that's partners. That's cooperation with different companies and in between different stakeholders. That's actually the point or the focus I would like to shift now. That how in your work, it's as we all have heard, it's a very complex issue. Either it's soil, it's biodiversity, it's everything that is related to regenerative agriculture or the situation we have in our society today. What have you experienced, or what are your thoughts about the cooperation between different stakeholders? How do you see this? Kadri, what about you? How important is, for example, for your research station and also for the university to cooperate with the farmers, with the startups, with different stakeholders?
Yes, of course, it is important, because I guess that important part of our work is to give our farmers the data that they need and how they need it. It's always cooperation, that what are the interests of different parts and how we can put it together, and with universities too, because they have more knowledge and maybe better knowledge than we do. And of course, we are discussing and maybe find new ways how to calculate something or have better results in topics that are important in the future or just nowadays. For example, we have worked together with Estonian University of Life Sciences to have future scenarios about how the soil organic carbon stock will change in our agricultural fields or in grasslands, and also important thing about Estonia is that we have quite a large amount of peat soils in Estonia. They are high. They have high content of soil organic carbon, but if they are managed unsuitably, I mean that when those soils are cultivated, then there is a very quick mineralization process, and those soils lose quite large amount of their soil organic carbon stock and also concentration too. So we need to work together to give farmers that information that they should keep those lands under permanent plant cover, and also to work with universities, because they have a better knowledge sometimes how to calculate something or have those results that they are seeking for.
Yeah, true. And I think just from my side, which I have been really thinking about a lot, is how important it is actually that this tremendous and useful research you are doing at universities and research stations and the data, that it's really very important to put this into practice, that really the farmers could use this somehow and could really improve the system, as well as maybe the society would know more about the data and how to use it and how to improve the situation and so on. But I have a question to Erki actually. In relation to your work in cleantech and Beamline, you are working really closely with different experts from different fields to really work out a program for startups in Accelerator, for example. What kind of cooperation you have in relation to agriculture or will have? What have you planned maybe?
Yeah, just first thing I'd like to pitch in for the previous discussion as well. The collab might be public-private partnership or with the universities, directly with the startup, and so on. With these kind of collaborations, I mean, I believe Michael and Oliver can also agree that if there's any research being done on the university level and it kind of reaches the kind of stage where it shows the potential to be commercialized and should then provide impact for the market, then it's really behind the people who are behind it, right? Because especially if you're entering kind of the startup world, where investors do not only invest in good research, but they invest in the people to whom they believe that can actually scale up their product. And with that kind of scale up in mind, there was a comment as well, and that directed to Michael, because I'm too curious about the startup things. That if your startup, if you can kind of monitor the soil, the kind of contents and everything with essential bees as your kind of swarm of drones, then how do you see it scale on the global scale? If we're looking at the developing countries where it is with the most necessity is to understand what is actually going on and what could be then implemented as well. When would you reach, or when do you think you're going to reach the scale that it can be cost effective and be scaled? And can you export your bees as well, or how would that go if in those areas there, for example, might not be that large amount of bees that you can monitor?
Well, to respond, yeah. First, we work with local bees, so we never export bees, and that's important. But it's all about collaboration. When you're a startup, it's like nature. You need diversity. I don't believe that a startup can scale without collaborating. If we have to scale in other countries, we always work with local partners. So it can be universities, it can be incubators, it can be NGOs, etc. The idea is not, we don't believe, we want to have impact. And to have impact, you have to collaborate with universities. They have the know-how. NGOs, they have the know-how in terms of local context, etc. And we just have solutions that we provide to these kind of actors so that they can use it also locally. I think that's the way you have to scale. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is that technology can help to scale as well, including digital technology. But there, it's important to notice, and we talked about that with Olivier, that technology is useful if it helps to have more impact, to scale, and so on. Technology for technology, we're not really interested in that. But that's why, for the moment, we develop tools with Microsoft and Accenture, and those kind of companies, big companies, can help startups also in terms of expertise, in terms of a network, and so on. And I really think that for startups, collaboration is a must. And as early you collaborate with proper partners, the easier it will be to scale.
Mm-hmm. I think Michael kind of answered my question to you as well, with the same kind of collaboration aspect. Of course, we learn as we go as well, as we're concentrating on the very specific topics in the clean tech sector. The clean tech sector itself is rather broad, but it still has a very holistic approach, right? As Michael mentioned, the kind of technology as the enabler for many sectors. But of course, universities, research agencies, the government, who could perhaps provide a sandbox opportunity for the startups, right, to test out, look past the regulations and so on, also receive funding. But also with larger corporates, who I think are playing like the major role. If Oliver talked about, the oil shale, for example, the oil shale industry, well, if coming back to Estonian example, but that's a great one, then that definitely has a huge impact on the agriculture, either as the chemical industry, as a provider of fertilizers, but also as a polluter, as a kind of a, if you also have underground mines, then that's going to degrade the land surface, etc. So that all kinds of plays together. If there's corporate responsibility in the play, then of course there's a lot of budget to kind of pilot or test with the startups, or even maybe invest in them, right? Kind of get your heart clean and well.
Yeah, cool. Oliver, could you give you some thoughts about cooperation and your examples, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. So in general, I think collaborations are always, not always in a sense, but I prefer collaborating for a number of reasons. I like gathering a group of organizations around whatever I'm building or whatever I'm working around, to be able to work based on demand. So if I have a specific project, I have a specific need, and I have an ecosystem of organizations I can go together with. Instead of trying to do everything myself, I know there's already other partners out there who might have more knowledge, who are established, and I don't necessarily need to compete with them. I don't necessarily believe in competition, right? We can work together and together build better products than we would alone. This is in general how I approach partnerships in that sense. And I think it's great to have partners also across different fields, right? Partnerships with universities, with corporates, but also with the civil society organizations, NGOs. And then really you can start drawing, you can draw people out of their silos. I like being a systems aggregator, drawing people out of their bubbles and connecting them with each other. And then interesting things starts happening, because we all have a different perspective of the solution, right? It's the famous thing. We look at an elephant and somebody's looking at the tail and somebody at the trunk, and we all have their perspectives on a certain challenge or issue. And together we can formulate much better solutions than if we try to go at it alone. And in general, yeah, cooperating is much nicer than competing, in my opinion. So.
But I guess you still need a kind of a proportion of a healthy competition, right, in order to boost the development.
Healthy competition can push you forward, but it's not in a way like, I don't believe in goals like I need to be market leader. That's not a KPI for me, right? I want to be the market leader. Why? It's not a goal. It's not a mission, right? It doesn't mean anything, because in 5 years you will no longer be the market leader and some other company will be there, and it's very short term thinking. So in that sense, I do agree competition can help you, but it's in a way that you stimulate each other, and it shouldn't be a way like, oh, they're my competitors, so I'm not talking to them. No, I want to be talking to somebody who's doing the same thing, so we can learn from each other. Do we collaborate? Does it make sense? Maybe not. But if it does, then sure. Yeah, and
share experiences and so on. Yeah. But you, we have a concrete question from our audience about biostimulants. What do you think about it? I have heard a little bit about this topic, but maybe either Michael or Oliver or Kadri even have some experience with this.
I know that
Yeah.
I know that the person who asked the question is from a startup called Vetic, and they are producing
Okay.
biostimulants in
Okay.
photosynthesis.
Yeah, but
So I know that you get the answer.
yeah.
I know a bit about Vetic. As far as I know, they do something with seaweed, right? Seaweed and then biostimulants out of that. So yes, biostimulants have definitely can play an important role. I do think that we need to be careful that we're not selling. I'm going to take the farmer's perspective, right? I wouldn't want to see this transition ending up in a system where instead of putting chemicals, we're only putting biologicals, but we're still inputting a lot of things in a system. It's not only, the system needs to balance itself. If we keep putting in something, it's still this idea of infinite resources, etc. It's not necessarily sustainable in the long run. However, that being said, biostimulants are definitely a way of helping farmers transition and feeding the plant through either the leaves or feeding the soil life instead of directly feeding the plant. So it has a lot of benefits, I would say. Another remark that I have there is that instead of buying biostimulants, farmers can also produce their own biostimulants. Not everything. For example, Vetic is working with seaweed. We can't expect a farmer to farm his own seaweed and to take the products out of there. Seaweed has particular properties, certain hormones in them, certain minerals, which are quite interesting, which farmers might not be able to access. But others, farmers can produce themselves. They can create compost extracts. There's different ways of using your own cultures of bio components to apply on the field. So yes, in general, very useful, very necessary to accelerate the transition, I would say, but not if we again use it as something to be dependent on. Like replace chemicals with biologicals is not, it's the same way of thinking. It's not going to change the system. It's going to perpetuate the problems we have, I fear.
Yeah, I agree. But Kadri, maybe you have you some kind of research maybe with those stimulants, or are you planning to have some, or what are your opinions about this?
No, we haven't really studied about biostimulants for ourselves, but I guess yes, like Oliver said, if it's organic matter, almost like you put it in the soil back usually, then it will of course be useful for the soil condition, and it will increase the soil organic carbon content also. Like there are different fractions of soil organic carbon. There are labile fraction and stable fraction. So this kind of components usually increase the stable fraction. So, and it will change soils better structured and increase water retention capacity, for example. So it will be good to use them.
Yes, let me see if there are some more questions we haven't really asked.
I have a question, if I can.
Yeah,
Again,
please, yes.
Especially for Michael. So where do you see your business going? I mean, what is the future of biodiversity? I mean, at the moment you're kind of using the bees as your data harvesters, right? What can you see forward from there?
Well, yeah, we're using bees. We're using our ecologists. We're using, domestic bees, solitary bees. So we develop different expertise and solutions to collect data. I think today we're at a stage where, we have enough data. We have interesting data that we want to share in a proper way, to help people to act easily. And that's the next step is probably to use artificial intelligence or softwares, whatever, to really make this data available in a proper way to local farmers, citizens, and so on, so that they can start acting as well. Today, we work mainly with large corporates or cities, including for budget reasons. So with technology and artificial intelligence, for example, we'll be able to make our data or assessments available at a much lower price to people who can also be part of the change process. So that's really our focus for the next years. And of course, we still want to expand our current solutions, in developing countries where I think, as mentioned, there's a lot of challenges, including in terms of increase of use of pesticides and things like that. And people are not necessarily well aware of that. And the advantage with our tool is that we can prove what's happening, and we can really show things. And on many projects, people are just not aware of the kind of pollutants we find. We talk a lot about small particles or things like that, but even in organic agriculture, for example, you can find the heavy metals. So I think it's useful to expand and to make this data as much available as possible, so that people can be part of the change.
But do you see the bees? The data that you receive from the bees and from the pollination, do you see that as one part of the data kind of input, and you then incorporate also other data that, for example, Agricultural Research Center is kind of providing, or the kind of national scope?
Yeah, I think you have to combine, whatever data you can combine. I won't say that our data is, you can't conclude on just one set of data. I think you have to look at other databases. So we work a lot with different kind of local databases. I think satellites can be useful as well, GIS, and so on. So I think you have to combine as much data, proper data, as you can to come up with the proper solutions. That's what we already do. But yeah, so and the more data is made available, like open data by governments or by local regions, or even by companies. If you look at Microsoft, they really try to do a program that is called AI for the Planet, where they really want to make data available to everybody. And so the more open source data we have, the more we'll be able to come up with some proper tools to help.
So essentially, the data plays like a huge role, right? Just for us to understand what's going on, like from the farmers down to the consumers level, and to the the policy makers and decision makers. So there's a kind of concept of Gaia, and Gaia hypothesis, that the Earth is a living, breathing organism, right? It has its own cycles, it breathes, emits, etc., etc. So as far as I see, as well as agriculture and food sector is one of the highest growth in the clean tech sector, with the most investments being poured into, as well as the most technologies being implemented. As you also mentioned, the AI, the machine learning, etc., etc. So do you think that in the future we can kind of have this kind of a Google Translate model of we can kind of understand what the Earth, or what the plants, the kind of living organisms are talking to us, or what are they saying, right? So it essentially could become like a big data driven language translator for us, right?
I believe that's one of the solutions. I'm not sure it would happen, but I believe that if we've been working on biodiversity topics since 8 years now, so it was quite early stage compared to other startups, and we realized that since 2 years, biodiversity really becomes a topic, and so people start understanding what it means, and the more people understand. And the more people understand why biodiversity is important and why we're impacted by the loss of biodiversity, the better it will be. So as much information you have, if you can raise awareness through this data, well, if Google can work on that topic, that would be great, probably, yeah.
I quickly want to jump in on that, because I think Michael mentioned something very important, which is the mindset. And we can have data-driven solutions, but it's a mindset of how we implement tools, how we think about technology, how we think about the relationship between nature and technology. If that doesn't change, then we're still in a very technocratic society, and it's not gonna have the results we imagine. So there are scientists now having plants send emails. There's incredible things possible, for sure. But how are we interacting with Gaia in a way, right? That's what Erki said. Like, what is our place in that ecosystem? And now we don't have a place. We've kind of extracted ourselves from that system, and we say, like, we're no boundaries, we're using everything. If we have data that can show us what the boundaries are, we can stay within that in a way, or it kind of makes us understand what those boundaries are, sure. But in and of itself, it's not a solution. It can raise awareness. It should feed our mind of having a different mindset, understanding what we're actually doing. I think that's really crucial. So yeah, thanks for raising that, Michael. I think that's a key point.
I agree as well. Michael, there's a very specific question for you. You mentioned bees as natural drones. How does that work in terms of data collection? What is measured?
Because actually what we measure is the pollen. So the bees will cover, a circular surface of more or less 700 hectares, and they're going to visit billions of flowers, out of which they take the pollen. And we developed a device that collects this pollen and methodologies to analyze the pollen. So we're really working on the pollen sample, because that's the one that is the most representative of the environment and that gives the best results. Again, to obtain results regarding industrial and agricultural pollution and plant diversity.
Okay, thank you. Interesting. Yes, let's see if we do we have more questions from the audience? So go on if you have more questions. And we can try to find answers to those.
I just has another small comment, a wacky one, as I usually do have. So essentially, what Michael and Oliver said here, Oliver mentioned about the plants sending emails. So if we're going to convert that into Michael's language, or the bees language, then essentially in the future we could see that, for example, if Michael, the biodiversity could be applied for the farmers, then the farmers could receive like emails from bees automatically saying that, hey John, your farm's northeast corner is heavily polluted by heavy metals at the moment. Go check out what's going on, right? Could this be like a thing that we're going into or stepping into in a couple of years?
What you're talking about is kind of integrating machines and nature, right?
Yeah,
you're trying to.
No, of course, not the bees hitting enter button. No, absolutely.
Yeah. What we know, for example, about the fungal network is that it's very similar to our internet. It operates in a very similar way. There's interesting touching points there. Are we going to go to that level that you described? I honestly don't know. I think it's possible, but technologically wise, they're far into deep tech space, right? We're talking about Elon Musk's neural link implanting something that communicates directly with the brain and then translate that to a digital network. I think technologically, for sure, it's possible if we figure out certain things, but is it something we would necessarily want always? I don't know. It's an ethical question more for me than it probably is a technological one in a way. Technology wise, will we be able to get there? It's a matter of time, probably, unless there are some hard physical limits, some things like gravity that we struggle to overcome. I would say then it might take 1,000 years. I don't know what the time frame is, but.
So probably next year we'll see the first startup in this.
Next year is the first neural. Yes, exactly.
So just to remind you that we have open call in Beamline. So yeah, we're waiting for interesting startups to come to apply. But there is one more question to Oliver from Nel Ilmjärv. If we are speaking about intense cultivation of crops in the fields, we are removing a lot of components from the soil, including minerals, nutrients, and so on. Is it even possible to have this practice without the addition of mineral and organic components to the soil? So I would add here is maybe generative agriculture a solution? Well, how do you see that?
Yeah. So I think there is a big misunderstanding about certain elements. So yes, some nutrients are washed out of the soil if the soil is not protected. That's definitely possible. But in general, I would say in Europe, sure, we don't have a lack of nutrients in the soil. It's that the nutrients that are in the soil are not accessible to plants. That's a difference. They're in an inaccessible form for plants, so they can't use them. It's not that their nutrients are not in the soil, they're just locked up in a way. The natural process is that the soil microbiology metabolizes those. They bring them to the plant roots, and in exchange for carbon-rich sugars, they trade more or less. It's not as simple as that, obviously, but they trade those micronutrients and macronutrients for sugars that plants make through photosynthesis. What we've done with intensive practices is we've cut that relationship. We've said we will introduce the nutrients, and the plants no longer have a need to associate with the soil microbiology, which obviously the soil microbiology now has lost a major source of its food. Add practices like tilling the soil, where you're just exposing the soil microbiology to the sun or the weather. Add fertilizers that have a certain, their salts can be considered salts that are also detrimental to soil microbiology, killing soil microbiology. Add pesticides, herbicides, etc. We've really killed soil microorganisms, which is 20% of the world's biodiversity, by the way. That's a huge part of our biodiversity is in the soils. If we want to, regenerative agriculture aims to restore this, aims to restore soil microbiology, and the soil microbiology then also starts adding soil structure. This relationship between plants and microbiology is not only between them, but it starts changing the soil environment. You can see changes in pH levels. We can see changes in the amount of air that's in the soil. This means more water can infiltrate in the soil. We see changes in the amount of carbon. One thing, if we add nitrogen to the soil, it stimulates certain bacteria that start burning off carbon. So by adding nitrogen, we're actually burning off carbon in the soil. So there's a lot of these systems with intensive practices that are very detrimental to the soil. Regenerative practices understand how this works, how nature normally works, and stimulates things. So instead of killing soil microbiology, we start feeding soil microbiology. We don't feed the plant, we feed the soil microbiology. If we feed the plant, we feed it directly through the plant leaves, so that it doesn't interfere with the soil microbiology in a way. That's very short. I would say that's my answer to that question.
Yes, and just to add to here, I'm really happy that at least in Estonia we talk more and more about regenerative agriculture, also on higher levels, on the state governmental levels. So really, at least I think both farmers and also society understands the principles of regenerative agriculture, and it's I really hope it's the future. Yeah, it's the future possibility. But I have very general questions. Actually, maybe to all of you, and it actually comes from Philip. Yes, he really thanks for the insights. But there is one question: do you have faith in the global supply model, or the allies of regenerative agriculture are informed consumers and local regional community development? Or do you think, do you have
I can
faith?
answer, but I want to leave space for the other panelists. So
yes, you are free to answer, either Kadri or Michael. Yeah.
That's a difficult one.
Yes.
It'll be difficult. To be honest, I think it's, even when I see large corporates, it's difficult for them to change as well, and the difficulty also with agriculture is that you have various layers. So you have the food producer, then you have cooperatives, then you have the brand that sells, and so on. And what I see, one of the difficulties even we have, is to see who's going to really be involved. Is it the local food producer? Is it the ones that are going to buy? And what's the traceability then, in terms of data and so on? And so the whole system is, you have so many layers, it's difficult to change. So I think if we want to change it, the whole model, and that is basically the food system is controlled by some large corporates, and probably this whole model has to change with circular economy and so on. But it's a huge change. So in a real systemic change, probably. So it's always also a way to consume differently. So as a consumer, it starts. I guess it starts there. We have to change as consumers, and then the rest will change as well, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, there has to be a shift somewhere, actually, in maybe in every level, on every level. But maybe you would like to add some comments, Erkki, Katri, to this last question.
I can add a perspective from some of the consulting work we've done
Yes,
with corporates,
please.
for example.
Yes,
So
yes.
what we see with corporates is, not all of them obviously, but a number of corporates really are engaged. They really want to change, and they have good intentions. It's not that they're bad-willed or anything, right? But like Michael said, the chain is complex, and they're saying we cannot carry this load alone. If we want to change something, it's not, we're a part of the supply chain. We can't be expected to pay for all the change in the supply chain. So they want the different actors to move along. And that's a very complex process, because there are solutions out there. We know how to solve things, but we're talking from the level of changing a farmer's mindset about farming up to the way of educating a consumer about a product. It's the whole range that we're talking about, and that's challenging. It's a challenging process. If we're talking about centralization versus decentralization, we see a lot of power concentrated in the hands of very few food producers. Is this sustainable in the long run? From a systemic point of view, probably no. And we see also a lot of these food producers are interested in decentralization and moving towards more regional production. Why? Because it offers the opportunity for regional brands, it offers opportunity for regional support systems, etc. The other way around, we see farmers just cutting the supply to corporates and saying, we are starting to sell directly to our community. We build a community of customers around us, we do direct marketing, and we keep that. Is that for everybody? No. In general, I think it's always good to move more towards a diverse system. Diversity of solutions. There's no single solution. So yes, at this point, it's too concentrated. There's one model, and that's not going to hold up into the future, probably. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, true. I totally agree. And it's also, yeah, we have a little echo here now. I don't know if it's only my technical problem again. I hope not. I hope it's not a big problem. But it is important that you are looking at different perspectives and really involve different stakeholders. And either it's a discussion, it's a tool development, or either it's a startup. So really involve those who have information and really, cooperate, or how they say. But
if I can also give my 2 pence here.
Yes.
So yes, I would agree with the guys who talked previously as well, and definitely looking forward for Katri's answer to this as well. But in my opinion, looking at what is going on in the kind of innovation and startup sector in this level, then definitely the kind of agricultural or the kind of production of eatable goods is moving on the local level or the kind of regional and community level. If we can even talk about larger supermarkets that are starting to produce, or restaurants that are producing their produce at site, like on site, tomatoes being grown and cucumbers, etc., salad, lettuce. So this is getting definitely more and more closer to the consumers, and in my opinion, why is that? Is because I think there's the trust thing. Because if you look at the consumers today, that who is consuming the ecological products, or eco products, then these are the people who are really looking into where this produce comes from, how is it produced, what does it contain, right? Of course, the price is also important, but that might not be the kind of primary. But then you have to kind of trust the producer who for example, produces you those this pasta or those tomatoes. So there's more and more consumers who are getting more aware and looking into buying local produce. I guess that's why the local farms, especially in Western Europe, are very popular. Maybe not that much in our region at the moment, but I think this is not going anywhere. It's rather getting more and more serious with even the global corporates, global supermarket chains that are now looking into generating their own food to sell on site, like grown locally, sold locally.
Yeah, I also saw a quick comment here on the, it's from, I think it was from Evelyn, who is saying that it's actually contradictory when society seeks for the cheapest food prices, and yeah, there are a lot of questions related to that. But Kadri, I would really like to hear your opinion as well.
Yes, well, I agree with the previous talkers that the food production should be more localized in the future, and I guess that our eating habits should also change. Not only that, I don't know, farmers think so, or few people think so, but we have to think about our habits together with all the people in the world. That if we really want to decrease our carbon gas emissions and have a better environment in the future, then I guess that it will be not only change in our bright minds, but also just everyone that should be involved in this process.
Yeah, it's really, really great to hear this positive note here at the end. I'm really hopeful. And yeah, I think, I don't know if maybe there are some questions more, but I would really think that maybe we are soon to completed our session here, or what do you think? Are there some final notes you would like to add to this panel? Just hopeful, and maybe some kind of message for the startups who are going to apply for the Accelerator program, maybe some final notes, please. Michael, maybe?
Well, yeah, the positive note is that I think things are changing. And I strongly believe that there's a huge opportunity for startups. They can lead the change. There's a lot to be done. And there's also a kind of market that is growing. And money coming from Europe or from other sources, companies, as Olivier said, that want to be more and more involved on those subjects and so on. So it's really time to have startups coming with innovation and solutions. And so that's what I would say. Just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Oliver, take it away.
Yeah, in general, I think the next challenges, we might say there's great challenges, right? It's sometimes said that the 21st century is a century of great challenges. I think for me personally, it's such a nice opportunity to change things. It's such interesting topics to work around. It's so dynamic, so diverse. So as a startup, there's so much material to work around, so much value to add to society. I don't think there's been a point in recent history where so many things are starting to move and so many capital is actually being freed up to change things. So now is definitely a time to jump. Have a clear vision, have a mission, and try to add value to the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. Kadri, maybe your final words.
Oh, my final words is about healthy soils, that maybe this political perspectives and all the climate change topic is a bit right now it's a bit too basic, but we have to go in the depths to really have a change. I guess that it is there is much more to discuss about and see how the different aspects of environment are how could you put these together and have better results.
Yeah, how related everything is, how complex
so
everything is. Really,
yes.
really look at this holistic picture and take into consideration different different viewpoints. But Erkki, maybe you would like to add something. Yeah.
Yes, I myself, I'm rather optimistic about the future. Looking at all the innovations, the new kind of approaches, systematic approaches, regenerative farm agriculture, new technologies being developed, etc., as well as Oliver mentioned, a lot of capital being released on the market, and especially kind of, I think that all comes with a sense of urgency. We have known that there's going to be a lot of people on the planet, a lot of mouths to feed, but it has been kind of, like postponed. Maybe do it a bit more easier way, just increase the efficiency of the incumbent technologies, etc. But now, as we're kind of leaning in on the Green Deal, the Fit for 55, etc., especially in Europe, suddenly other countries have kind of understood that we're actually in a hurry, right? So that's why there's a lot of capital being shot out there in the market as well. And I do hope that all this capital that's being deployed for the research and development, as well as for innovation and commercialization, that it's being assessed by very competent people where this money is being guided towards. So there's my faith.
Yeah, very good. You brought out this point. I also think that this assessment point, it's really, really important, that it shouldn't be kind of so shallow, that it should be, and I also agree to Kadri, it should be deeper. It should be really, we should consider really the complexity, as I already said. But dear panelists and also the audience, I really, really deeply thank you for the participation. And I think it has been really interesting discussion here. And as we saw, there are serious problems in our agricultural, in our food system. But there are solutions, and there are certainly, as you have mentioned many times, all of you, there is place for innovation. Either it's a digital world or it's practical solution and so on. So I really hope that in this during this panel, you got inspired, all of you, also the panelists, that you got useful information and you can go on here and work on with those topics. And I really would like to invite you to especially startups, to apply for our open call, which is, and this is especially for agricultural innovation. So, and if you want to get more information, please go to beamline.fund. Okay, but once again, big thanks to all of you, and good luck, and have a really nice holidays, and have some rests. And I really hope we can meet again in near future. So good luck, everybody, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.